US Senate unanimously passes Hong Kong Rights Bill. Edited. The Senate bill has been watered down somewhat from the House bill, rendering parts of my initial comment incorrect. There might be more differences that I haven't picked up yet. Simple explanation of the effects of this bill, now act not yet signed. 1. Sanctions on individuals mean that anybody on the list and their families, families have been removed, cannot have any dealings with any US companies. If they have any assets passing through US banks, it'll be frozen. If their kids are studying in the US, they'll be deported. The reach of American financial networks means that for the most part, the lackeys, officials doing the dirty work will have to jump through more hoops to spend their ill-gotten gains. Sunset clause added to end sanctions 5 years after enactment. 2. The US and other countries give Hong Kong a special status, separate from the rest of China. It's the reason why the city of 7 million is the world's second largest importer of Chinese goods and the source of 70% of China's foreign investments. Hong Kong is China's cheat code to get goods out and money in, avoiding things like tariffs. This law gives the executive power to jeopardize that status in the US by submitting an annual report on whether Hong Kong is still sufficiently autonomous. An interesting development with regards to the second point is that just yesterday the Standing Committee of the Chinese Parliament claimed sovereignty over the Constitutional Court of Hong Kong, in violation/reinterpretation of the Basic Law. If they maintain these claims, Hong Kong will not be sufficiently autonomous to maintain its special status. Hong Kong will not be sufficiently autonomous to maintain its special status. According to this bill, that depends entirely on the conclusion of the Secretary of State, who obviously answers directly to the President. Any sanctions also depend on the same people. Depending on the President in office and their political situation, it's not hard to imagine that any review/sanctions would be based more on the President's political reality than the reality in Hong Kong. Can someone explain what implications this has for international relations? China is going to absolutely hate it. China is incredibly sensitive about territorial integrity and sovereignty, so much so that non-interference in the internal affairs of other countries is almost a cliché. The fact that HK is actually legitimately owned by China after the 1997 handover strengthens their view that the US is acting in bad faith and interfering in their sovereignty. It also confirms their long-standing paranoia that the US is acting deliberately to divide or otherwise inhibit China's rise. China sees our actions in HK and our actions towards the protests in Chile, Bolivia, etc. and believes the disparity in attention is because of our malicious intent towards China. Obviously, the US side points out China's illegal actions violating HK's rule of law, the 1997 agreement, etc. as well as the human rights violations. Interestingly, Chinese will say something like, "Why are you telling us what to do in our own country? We don't tell you how to run the US," to which I would respond, "Yes, you call out racism and other inhumane acts in the US all the time, and frankly I'm happy when the international community pressures us to be better, because accountability is important." But that's veering away from the main point. Expect a serious deterioration in relations between the US and China as a result of this. How long it lasts will depend on what happens with the protests, I think. Whether an action like this works or not will be uncertain. The amount of international pressure put on China will probably be a key factor. If it's just the US, UK, and Australia, not much will come of it, I would bet. Australia is not going to put any meaningful pressure on China. We are probably complicit at this point. I would not be surprised if there were sitting members in Parliament taking Chinese money under the table right now. People are surprised that in the US House and Senate, despite it all, are in agreement when it comes to China. Hopefully so. It still has to pass the House. It has passed the House and is OTW to the White House. A version of it passed the House already. They just need to reconcile differences between the two versions, which shouldn't take that long. Then Trump needs to sign it or veto it within 10 days. If he doesn't sign it or veto it, it generally becomes law with some weird exceptions that aren't likely in this place. If he vetoes it, the Congress can override the veto with a 2/3 majority, which they obviously have. Trump won't veto. It's another arrow in his trade war arsenal. We can even agree with Trump on something. This is strange. It's like Code Geass, everyone is uniting against a common enemy. Is there pizza though? Left and right unite on something other than Epstein didn't kill himself. A broken clock's right twice a day. A functional security camera randomly turns off twice a day. Why did I find this so amusing? It's actually fucking sad. Coping mechanism. Fuck yeah. Now let's see if Trump actually signs it. He has been awfully and uncharacteristically silent on the issue. The House bill was unanimous in the House and this was unanimous in the Senate. They have the 2/3 majority required to override the veto, so it really doesn't matter much what he does. Unless of course this was all staged by the GOP to distract from the impeachment. So Trump vetoes and McConnell doesn't bring it up for a vote for the next 6 months. Why would Trump veto this? People aren't confident that they can predict his actions. People aren't confident that he can predict his actions. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this will allow the US to repeal Hong Kong's special trade status and enact the same tariffs that currently apply to China, right? Yes. It's basically telling mainland China, if you integrate Hong Kong forcefully, don't expect to reap the benefits of Hong Kong's special trade status. That's just beautiful, really clever, almost makes me want to consider becoming a politician. You'd also have to sell your soul to corporate interests and you're 25% more likely to be a pedophile. Not worth it. We need more honest politicians. Encourage people to be involved. Seriously. Why not run, remain ethically conscious, collect good wages? Disrupt the system yourself, and be the change we all want to see. Because the people have power. So what does this mean for the protesters? Individuals who infringe on their freedoms can face sanctions, and have any assets they have in the US frozen. How does this help the HK protesters? The US can now freeze assets of the CCP officials who have a large portion of their money hidden in the US. Please, can we get them out of inflating the housing market in New York City and wherever else? Vancouver says what up Brett? Melbourne says what up Moyite? Auckland says we're beached as bro. Hawaii says how's it Brad up? Florida says, hey y'all wanna sink a boat? Has anybody asked LeBron his thoughts yet? I think that would be wise. After all, he is very informed on the situation, and how it would impact people, and their money. Man, Space Jam 2 gonna be so Chinese we'll have to see in theaters from a camera phone. Look man. I don't know where your upvotes are, but you deserve more of them. It's those Chinese downvotes. Gotta get them, while they can still be tricked by their government. The Senate then passed a second bill, also unanimously, that would ban the export of certain munitions to Hong Kong police forces. It bans the export of items such as tear gas, pepper spray, rubber bullets and stun guns. Looks like we're using RPGs, claymores, C4 grenades and tanks boys, HKPD. China doesn't import anything defense related. All their pepper spray and rubber bullets etc. are local. The predominant tear gas being used in Hong Kong until very recently was made in Pennsylvania. More recent stuff is made in China and horrifically toxic, putting dioxin, carcinogen, meters literally off the scale.